The silver morning sun cast long shadows across the Arizona desert as the stage coach rocked violently, sending Vivian Armstrong's heart into her throat. One moment, they had been traveling smoothly along the dusty road to Jerome Junction, and the next, the right wheels caught a hidden washout, pitching the entire vehicle sideways with a splintering crack. Vivian barely had time to brace herself against the opposite seat before they were airborne, then crashing down into a shallow ditch with such force that her carefully pinned hair came loose around her shoulders. "Lord Almighty," cried Mrs. Holloway, the banker's wife, clutching her chest. "We've overturned." The year was 1885, and Vivian had been traveling west for nearly a week, leaving behind the comforts of Boston society to accept a teaching position in the growing settlement of Jerome Junction. As the dust settled inside the cabin, she assessed her fellow passengers. The portly Mr. Peterson, who had been dozing moments before, Mrs. Holloway with her expensive hat now askew, and the quiet Reverend Michaels, whose Bible had flown from his hands. "Is everyone all right?" Vivian asked, straightening her skirts and attempting to regain her composure. Before anyone could answer, the driver's voice called down from above. "Everyone's still alive in there. Stage is stuck good and proper. Axle might be broken too." Reverend Michaels tried the door, which was now angled awkwardly upward. "The door's jammed, driver. Sit tight. I'll get help from the station. We're only about 3 miles out from Junction." Vivian felt her heart sink. 3 miles in this heat would mean at least an hour's wait, and the stagecoach was already uncomfortably tilted, with the afternoon sun beginning to beat down on the exposed side. Mr. Peterson mopped his brow with a handkerchief. "Just our luck. I've got an important business meeting at the bank that can't be delayed. And I promised to help prepare for Sunday services," Reverend Michaels added with a sigh. 20 minutes passed in uncomfortable silence as they listened to the driver and his assistant unhitching the team of horses. The air inside the coach grew stifling, and Vivian felt perspiration dampening her collar and the back of her traveling dress. Mrs. Holloway had begun to fan herself frantically, her face growing alarmingly red. Then, like an answer to an unspoken prayer, they heard the approach of hoofbeats. A deep voice called out, "Looks like you folks could use some help." "That we could, mister," replied the driver. "Got 4 passengers inside and the doors jammed up good." Heavy boots crunched on gravel, then a shadow fell across the window. Vivian looked up to see a man peering in tall and broad-shouldered, with a sun-bronzed face beneath the brim of a worn Stetson. His eyes scanned the interior quickly, then locked with hers for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. "Stand back from the door," he instructed, his voice carrying easily through the window. There was a grinding sound of metal, then the door was wrenched open. Fresh air rushed in, bringing relief from the stuffiness. "Ladies and gentlemen," said the stranger, extending a hand inside. "Let me help you out of there." Mr. Peterson went first, grunting with effort as the cowboy hoisted him up with surprising strength. Next came Reverend Michaels, who thanked him profusely. Mrs. Holloway required the most assistance, flustered and fanning herself as she was guided carefully to solid ground. Then it was Vivian's turn. The cowboy extended his hand again, and as she placed her gloved fingers in his, she felt a strange jolt of awareness. "Watch your step, miss," he said, his voice softer than before. As he helped her from the coach, his eyes never left her face, even as he steadied her with a strong arm when her feet touched the ground. "Thank you, sir," Vivian said, adjusting her hat and trying to tuck her wayward auburn hair back into place. "Adam Daniels, madam," he replied, finally releasing her hand and touching the brim of his hat. "Ranch foreman at the R just north of Junction." "Vivian Armstrong," she replied, her Boston accent sounding particularly pronounced against his Western drawl. "I'm the new schoolteacher." A smile spread slowly across his tanned face, revealing a dimple in one cheek that softened his otherwise weathered appearance. "Is that right?" "Junction's been waiting on you for nearly a month." The driver approached, wiping his hands on his pants. "Mr. Daniels, you think you could help us get this stage upright? I need to get these folks to town." Adam nodded, but his eyes lingered on Vivian for a moment longer. "I've got my tools on my horse. We can try, but that axle looks bad." For the next hour, Vivian watched as Adam worked alongside the driver and his assistant to extract the stagecoach from the ditch. She couldn't help but notice how he moved with purpose and confidence, his muscles straining beneath his simple cotton shirt as he leveraged logs under the wheels and directed the men in their efforts. The other passengers had retreated to the shade of a nearby mesquite tree, but Vivian remained closer, ostensibly to watch over her luggage that had been removed from the coach. "The axles cracked," Adam finally announced, wiping sweat from his brow. "It won't make it to town without breaking completely." "What are we to do?" Mrs. Holloway exclaimed. "I cannot possibly walk 3 miles in this heat." Adam turned to face the stranded travelers. "I can ride to the station and bring back a wagon. It'll take about an hour round trip." "I'd be much obliged," said the driver with a nod. As Adam prepared to mount his horse, Vivian stepped forward. "Mr. Daniels," she called, her voice sounding unexpectedly breathless to her own ears. "Thank you for stopping to help us." He paused, one foot in the stirrup, and turned to look at her with those intense blue eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully maintained facade. "Just doing what any decent man would, Miss Armstrong. Nevertheless, we're fortunate you came along." His gaze traveled over her face, taking in her high cheekbones, the light dusting of freckles across her nose that she tried unsuccessfully to fade with lemon juice, and the loose tendrils of auburn hair that framed her face. "I'll be back as quick as I can," he promised, and somehow Vivian felt the words were meant for her alone. As Adam rode away in a cloud of dust, Vivian found herself watching until he disappeared over a rise in the road. She didn't notice Mrs. Holloway sidling up beside her until the woman spoke. "My dear, I couldn't help but observe the way that Cowboy looked at you. Quite improper, I must say." Vivian felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Mrs. Holloway." The older woman pursed her lips. "You're new here, Miss Armstrong, so let me give you some advice. Men like Adam Daniels aren't suitable companions for educated young ladies. The Triple R hands are known for their rough ways." Reverend Michaels, overhearing the conversation, joined them. "Now, Mrs. Holloway, that's not entirely fair. Adam Daniels is well respected in these parts. He may be a working man, but he's honest and God-fearing." "Perhaps," Mrs. Holloway sniffed, "but he's still a cowboy, and Miss Armstrong is to be our schoolteacher. There are certain standards to uphold." Vivian bit her tongue to keep from responding too sharply. At 24, she had grown weary of Boston society's rigid expectations and judgmental attitudes. It was part of why she had applied for the teaching position in Arizona Territory to begin with. "I assure you, Mrs. Holloway, I'm quite capable of managing my own acquaintances," she said evenly. "But I appreciate your concern." True to his word, Adam returned in just under an hour, driving a wagon pulled by 2 sturdy draft horses. Behind him rode another cowboy, younger and slighter in build. "This is Charlie," Adam introduced as they approached. "He'll help get your luggage loaded." As the men transferred the passengers' belongings from the disabled stagecoach to the wagon, Vivian noticed how Adam efficiently organized the space, making sure her trunk was secured properly. "Your school supplies are in here too?" he asked, his hand resting on the brass-bound trunk. "Yes," she replied, surprised he had known. "How did you word gets around in a small town?" he said with a slight smile. "Junction's been without a proper teacher since old Miss Winters took ill last winter. The children have been running wild, according to my sister. She's got 3 of her own." The casual mention of his sister intrigued Vivian. She had assumed he was a solitary figure, like many of the cowboys she'd read about in dime novels. "You have family in town, then?" Adam nodded, securing a rope around her trunk. "My sister Sarah and her husband run the general store. I stay out at the ranch most days, but I get into town for Sunday dinner when I can." Before Vivian could respond, Mrs. Holloway called out imperiously, "Miss Armstrong, we're ready to depart." The journey into Jerome Junction was uncomfortable but mercifully brief. The wagon had no springs, and every bump in the road jolted through the passengers. Vivian found herself seated beside Adam on the driver's bench, acutely aware of his proximity as he skillfully guided the team along the dusty trail. Behind them, the other passengers perched on makeshift seats among the luggage, with Charlie riding alongside on Adam's horse. "You've come a long way to teach in a small mining town," Adam commented as they crested a hill that revealed the settlement spread out below them. "What brings a Boston lady all the way to Arizona territory?" Vivian considered how to answer. The truth that she had fled an unwanted marriage arrangement orchestrated by her father wasn't something she wished to share with a stranger, no matter how kind his eyes or how strong his hands. "I wanted adventure," she said instead, which wasn't entirely untrue, "and the opportunity to make a difference. There aren't many positions for unmarried women in Boston that offer true independence." Adam nodded thoughtfully. "Junction's rough around the edges, but it's growing. The copper mines bring in new folks every month, towns trying to become respectable." He glanced at her with a hint of humor in his eyes. "Having a proper schoolteacher is part of that plan. And what about you, Mr. Daniels? Have you always been in Jerome Junction?" "Call me Adam," he said, his gaze returning to the road. "No, I came west after the war, fought for the Union, couldn't settle back home in Pennsylvania afterward. Something about these wide open spaces helps a man breathe easier." The simple statement told Vivian more about him than a lengthy explanation might have. He'd seen battle, perhaps horrors she couldn't imagine, and had sought healing in the wilderness of the West. It made her own reasons for fleeing Boston seem almost trivial by comparison. "Well, here we are," Adam announced as they rolled onto the main street of Jerome Junction. "Not much to look at, but it's home." Vivian took in the sight of the frontier town with curious eyes. A single wide street was lined with false-fronted wooden buildings, a general store, saloon, bank, and various businesses she couldn't immediately identify. Horses were hitched at rails outside several establishments, and people moved with purpose along the boardwalks. It was dusty and plainly utilitarian, nothing like the cobblestone streets and brick buildings of Boston, but it had a certain vitality that appealed to her immediately. Adam brought the wagon to a stop in front of a two-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Junction Hotel. He set the brake and jumped down, then reached up to help Vivian descend. "The school board's arranged for you to stay here until the teachers' quarters behind the schoolhouse are ready," he explained, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary as he set her on her feet. A thin man with spectacles hurried from the hotel, followed by a group of well-dressed townsfolk. "Ah, Miss Armstrong, we'd begun to worry when the stage was delayed. I'm Bernard Williams, president of the school board." As introductions were made and Vivian was welcomed by the town's leading citizens, she found her gaze repeatedly drawn to Adam, who was quietly unloading her trunk and bags from the wagon. He worked efficiently, exchanging few words with Charlie, who had dismounted to help. Mrs. Holloway had wasted no time in joining the group, already regaling them with the tale of their mishap and rescue. "We were most fortunate that Mr. Daniels happened along," she concluded, with a significant look at Vivian. "Though I must say, the experience was quite harrowing." "We're grateful for your assistance, Adam," Bernard Williams said with a nod in the cowboy's direction. "The town would have been most distressed if any harm had come to our new teacher." Adam touched the brim of his hat, just happened to be in the right place. His eyes found Vivian's across the crowd. Miss Armstrong handled herself with considerable grace under difficult circumstances. There was something in the way he said it, a note of admiration, perhaps, that sent an unexpected warmth through Vivian's chest. "Well," said Bernard, clapping his hands together, "Miss Armstrong must be exhausted from her journey. Mrs. Williams will show you to your room, my dear, and we've arranged a welcome dinner this evening at 7. As the crowd began to disperse, and Vivian was led toward the hotel entrance, she turned back to find Adam watching her. He gave her a slight nod, then climbed back onto the wagon. "Mr. Daniels," she called, breaking away from Mrs. Williams for a moment. "Will you be attending the dinner this evening?" A flicker of surprise crossed his face before he composed his features. "Don't think I was invited, Miss Armstrong." "That's a shame," she replied, feeling bold in a way she never had in Boston. "I would have liked the opportunity to thank you properly for your assistance today." His eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "Maybe another time. I've got to get back to the ranch." He gathered the reins in his hands. Welcome to Jerome Junction, Miss Armstrong." As the wagon pulled away, Vivian couldn't help but feel a curious sense of disappointment. She chided herself for the sentiment she had only just met the man. After all, but there had been something in those blue eyes that had stirred her interest in a way no Boston gentleman ever had. "Miss Armstrong," Mrs. Williams prompted gently from the hotel doorway, "your room is ready, dear." With one last glance at Adam's retreating figure, Vivian turned and followed her hostess into the hotel, unaware that Adam Daniels had also looked back, his thoughts similarly occupied with the auburn-haired schoolteacher who had arrived so unexpectedly in his life. The welcome dinner that evening was a lively affair held in the hotel's small dining room. The table was laden with the best the frontier town could offer: roasted beef, potatoes, cornbread, and apple pie for dessert. Vivian found herself seated at the head of the table as the guest of honor, with Bernard Williams to her right and his wife Martha to her left. Throughout the meal, she was introduced to what seemed like half the town's population, including several members of the school board, the mayor and his wife, the local doctor, and various business owners. They were friendly and curious, peppering her with questions about Boston, her journey west, and her teaching experience. "We've got 27 children enrolled for the school year," Bernard explained. "Ages 6 to 16, all levels of education. Some haven't had any formal schooling at all." "That's quite a challenge," Vivian acknowledged, "but I'm prepared for it. I brought plenty of materials, and I believe in adapting my teaching to each child's needs." "A progressive approach," commented Dr. Reynolds with approval. "Refreshing to hear, Mrs." Holloway, seated further down the table, sniffed audibly. "I do hope you'll maintain proper discipline, Miss Armstrong. The children here can be quite wild, especially those ranch children." Vivian smiled politely. "I find that children respond best to a balance of structure and respect, Mrs. Holloway." The conversation drifted to town affairs, and Vivian found herself thinking again about Adam Daniels. No one had mentioned him during dinner, despite his role in their rescue earlier that day. It was as if the social divide between townspeople and ranch workers was so firmly established that it went without saying. After dinner, as coffee was being served, Martha Williams leaned close to Vivian. "I couldn't help but notice your interest in Adam Daniels earlier today." Vivian felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He was very helpful when our stagecoach overturned." Martha nodded, her eyes kind but cautious. "Adam is well respected around these parts, one of the best horsemen and cattle handlers in the territory," but she hesitated. "Well, you should know that there are certain expectations for a schoolteacher in a small town like ours." "I'm well aware of the proprieties, Mrs. Williams," Vivian replied more stiffly than she intended. "Of course you are, dear. I just wanted to mention that Adam keeps to himself most of the time. He's not much for town gatherings or socials. Works hard, sends money to his sister's family, but," she shrugged, "some say he still carries the war with him." Vivian thought about the brief glimpse she'd had of something haunted behind Adam's steady gaze. "That's understandable. Many men do." Martha patted her hand. "Indeed. Well, you'll see him around town occasionally. His sister Sarah runs the mercantile with her husband Tom. Lovely family. They have 3 children who will be in your school." The next morning dawned clear and cool, with the promise of heat to come later in the day. Vivian rose early, eager to see the schoolhouse and begin organizing her classroom. After a simple breakfast of eggs and toast in the hotel dining room, she set out with Bernard Williams to walk the 3 blocks to the school. Jerome Junction was more impressive by daylight. Though still rough compared to eastern cities, Vivian could see signs of prosperity and growth everywhere. New construction was underway on several lots, and the businesses appeared well maintained. People nodded greetings as they passed, many stopping to introduce themselves to the new schoolteacher. The schoolhouse itself was a modest single-room building with a small bell tower, freshly painted white with green trim. Behind it stood a smaller structure that Bernard explained would be her living quarters once the final touches were complete. "Should be ready by next week," he assured her. "The men are finishing the stove installation and some shelving." Inside the schoolhouse, Vivian found rows of simple benches and desks, a larger desk at the front for her, and a blackboard that spanned the width of the room. Windows along both side walls provided ample light, and a pot-bellied stove in the corner would provide heat in the winter months. "It's perfect," she said, already envisioning how she would arrange the room for different age groups and lessons. "The town takes great pride in education," Bernard said, clearly pleased by her reaction. "We may be frontier folk, but we want our children prepared for the future. The copper mines won't last forever." Vivian spent the morning unpacking books and organizing supplies, with Bernard helping to move the heavier items. By noon, the classroom was taking shape, and she felt a surge of excitement about the coming school year. "I'll leave you to it," Bernard said, checking his pocket watch. "Martha's expecting me for the midday meal. Will you join us?" "Thank you, but I'd like to continue working," Vivian replied. "I brought some bread and cheese with me." After Bernard left, Vivian opened the windows to allow a breeze to circulate through the room. The air was dry and carried the scent of sage and dust. So different from the salt-tinged air of Boston, but already it felt somehow right, as if she had found a place where she truly belonged. She was arranging books on a shelf when the door creaked open behind her. Turning, expecting perhaps Bernard returning with some forgotten item, she instead found Adam Daniels standing in the doorway, hat in hand. "Mr. Daniels," she said, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "I wasn't expecting visitors." He shifted his weight, looking momentarily uncertain. "Miss Armstrong, I was in town delivering some cattle to the stockyard and thought I'd stop by." He glanced around the room. "Looks like you're getting settled in." "Yes, I've been organizing the classroom." She gestured to the partially unpacked crates. "Please come in." Adam stepped inside, his tall frame seeming too large for the schoolroom designed for children. He held his hat in front of him, turning the brim slowly in his hands. "I wanted to make sure you were all right after yesterday's excitement," he said. Stage accidents can sometimes leave folks feeling poorly the next day. Vivian was touched by his thoughtfulness. "I'm quite well, thank you. A bit sore, perhaps, but nothing serious." She moved closer, noticing that he'd shaved and was wearing a clean shirt, though still work clothes. "And you?" "You worked so hard to help us." "Used to physical labor," he said with a slight shrug. "Part of ranching life." An awkward silence fell between them. Vivian found herself noticing details about him. She'd missed yesterday the small scar that bisected his right eyebrow, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the lean strength of his hands as they worked at the brim of his hat. "My sister Sarah asked me to invite you to Sunday dinner," he said suddenly. "After church services. She's eager to meet you, and her children will be your students." Vivian couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. "I'd be delighted to accept." Adam's expression lightened, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Good, that's good." He glanced at the books she'd been arranging. "You've brought quite a library with you." "I believe in the power of books to open minds," she said, picking up a volume of Emerson's essays. "These are mostly for the older students, but I've brought primers and readers for the younger ones as well." Adam reached out hesitantly, his fingers brushing hers as he took the book from her hands. He opened it carefully, as if it were something precious. "I haven't read Emerson since before the war," he said quietly, surprising her. "You're familiar with his work," he nodded, eyes still on the pages. "My father was a schoolteacher in Pennsylvania, had a house full of books." He looked up, a shadow of something like embarrassment crossing his face. "Don't get much time for reading these days. You're welcome to borrow any book that interests you," Vivian offered impulsively. "I believe education should be available to everyone, not just children in a classroom." Adam closed the book gently and handed it back to her. "That's a generous offer, Miss Armstrong. I might take you up on it someday." He placed his hat back on his head. "I should let you get back to your work. The ranch foreman doesn't get too many hours in town." "Of course," she said, suddenly reluctant to see him go. "Thank you again for stopping by. And please thank your sister for the dinner invitation." At the doorway, he paused and turned back. "Miss Armstrong, I should warn you there's been talk about your arrival. Small towns run on gossip and—" He hesitated. "Some folks might not take kindly to seeing you associate with a ranch hand." Vivian raised her chin slightly. Mr. Daniels, I came west partly to escape people telling me who I should and shouldn't associate with. I make my own judgments about character. A slow smile spread across his face, warming his blue eyes. I can see why they hired you to wrangle those children. You've got backbone. I prefer to think of it as principles, she replied with a matching smile. Principles then. He touched the brim of his hat in a slight salute. Until Sunday, Miss Armstrong. As he walked away, his long strides carrying him quickly down the dusty street, Vivian found herself lingering in the doorway, watching until he disappeared around a corner. There was something about Adam Daniels that intrigued her, a complexity beneath the surface that belied his simple cowboy appearance. With a sigh, she returned to her work, but found her thoughts drifting repeatedly to Sunday and the promised dinner with Adam's family. The next few days passed in a blur of activity, as Vivian continued preparing the schoolhouse and meeting the families whose children would be her students. Each morning, she woke early and spent hours at the school, organizing books, writing lesson plans, and creating a schedule that would accommodate the various age groups. In the afternoons, Bernard Williams often escorted her around town, introducing her to parents and community members. By Saturday, she had met nearly all her future pupils and their families, with the exception of a few ranch children who lived too far out to make the trip into town casually. The diversity of her student body was striking: children of miners, merchants, ranchers, and laborers, with varying levels of previous education. Some could already read and cipher well, while others had never held a book. That evening, as she sat in her hotel room reviewing her notes on each child, a knock sounded at her door. Opening it, she found Martha Williams with a package wrapped in brown paper. "Good evening, Vivian," Martha said warmly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," Vivian assured her, stepping back to allow the older woman to enter. "I was just reviewing my student roster." Martha placed the package on the small table by the window. "I brought you something for tomorrow. Bernard mentioned you've accepted an invitation to the Millers for Sunday dinner." "Yes, after church services," Vivian confirmed, curious about the package. Martha's fingers worried at her handkerchief. "That's Sarah and Tom Miller's place, Adam Daniels' sister, as I'm sure you know." Vivian nodded, beginning to understand the reason for Martha's visit. "It's a perfectly respectable family," Martha continued quickly. "Sarah is active in the church and Tom runs a good business. It's just—" she sighed. "Well, their Sunday dinners are known to be rather informal. Ranch hands often join them, including Adam and some of the other R cowboys." "I see," Vivian said carefully. "And this concerns you?" Martha looked uncomfortable. "It's not my place to tell you who to socialize with, dear. You're a grown woman. But as the wife of the school board president, I felt I should mention that the town has certain expectations for its schoolteacher. Your reputation is important, especially as you're new here and unmarried." "Mrs. Williams," Vivian said gently but firmly, "I appreciate your concern, truly I do. But I've been invited to a family dinner after church. I can't imagine that attending would damage my reputation." "Of course not," Martha said quickly. "It's just, well, we've noticed how Adam Daniels looks at you, and the way you speak of him. People talk, Vivian." Heat rose to Vivian's cheeks. "Mr. Daniels has been nothing but courteous and helpful. I hardly think accepting his sister's dinner invitation implies anything improper." Martha patted her hand. "Of course not, dear. I just wanted you to be aware." She gestured to the package. "I thought you might like to wear this tomorrow. It was my daughter's before she married and moved to Prescott. The color would suit you beautifully." Curious despite her irritation, Vivian unwrapped the package to find a lovely dress of deep green cotton, modestly cut but more fashionable than the plain traveling clothes she had brought with her. "It's beautiful," she admitted, running her fingers over the fabric. "Elizabeth was about your size," Martha said with a wistful smile. "She left several dresses behind when she moved. I thought you might make use of them until you have time to have new ones made." Vivian's annoyance faded at the genuine kindness behind the gesture. "Thank you, Mrs. Williams. This is very thoughtful." After Martha left, Vivian held the green dress up against herself in front of the small mirror on the wall. It was indeed a beautiful garment, and would be a welcome change from the practical clothes she had packed. The fact that Martha had ulterior motives in offering it didn't diminish the generosity of the gift. Still, as she prepared for bed, Vivian couldn't help but feel a flicker of defiance. She had left Boston partly to escape the suffocating social expectations that had governed her life there. The idea that similar constraints might follow her even to the Arizona territory was discouraging. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, with the sound of church bells ringing across the small town. Vivian dressed carefully in the green dress Martha had given her, arranging her auburn hair in a simple but elegant style. As she pinned her hat in place, she studied her reflection critically. At 24, she was no longer the fresh-faced girl who had once turned heads in Boston ballrooms. But the western sun had already brought a healthy glow to her complexion, and there was a brightness in her green eyes that had been missing for some time. The church service was well attended, with nearly everyone in town dressed in their Sunday best. Vivian sat with the Williamses near the front, acutely aware of the curious glances directed her way. As the new schoolteacher, she was an object of interest to the entire community. Halfway through the opening hymn, movement at the back of the church caught her eye. Adam Daniels slipped in quietly, accompanied by a woman who bore a striking resemblance to him, the same blue eyes and strong jawline, though her features were softer, more feminine. Behind them came a tall man with sandy hair and 3 children of varying ages. They took seats in the last row, and though Vivian tried to focus on the service, she found her gaze repeatedly drawn to Adam's profile as he sang the hymns from memory, his deep voice just audible beneath the congregation's chorus. After the service concluded, congregants spilled out onto the church steps, chatting in the warm sunshine. Bernard Williams was immediately engaged in conversation with several members of the town council, while Martha introduced Vivian to more of the local women. "Miss Armstrong," called a friendly female voice, and Vivian turned to see the woman who had sat with Adam approaching, her family in tow. "I'm Sarah Miller, Adam's sister. We're so pleased you could join us for dinner today." "Mrs. Miller, thank you for the invitation," Vivian replied warmly. "I've been looking forward to it." Sarah introduced her husband Tom and their 3 children, Robert, who at 15 was the eldest student Vivian would teach, Emma, a bright-eyed girl of 12, and little Joshua, who at 6 would be starting school for the first time. "And of course, you already know my brother," Sarah said as Adam joined them, looking somewhat uncomfortable in his Sunday suit, which, while well-maintained, was clearly not new. "Miss Armstrong," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "that shade of green suits you." The simple compliment brought warmth to Vivian's cheeks. "Thank you, Mr. Daniels. You look very distinguished yourself." A slight smile touched his lips. "Don't let appearances fool you. This suit only sees daylight once a week and under protest." Sarah laughed, linking her arm through Vivian's. "Adam would live in his work clothes if society allowed it. Now, shall we head home? Dinner won't be ready for another hour, but we can get acquainted while Tom finishes the roast." The Miller home was a comfortable 2-story house behind the Mercantile, furnished simply but with obvious care. The front parlor held a piano, several well-worn armchairs, and shelves lined with books that immediately caught Vivian's attention. "You have quite a collection," she remarked, scanning the titles. "Mostly Tom's," Sarah explained. "He was educated back east before coming west. The children have inherited his love of reading, especially Robert." The 15-year-old boy, who had been quietly observing Vivian, straightened at the mention of his name. "Do you have many books at the school, Miss Armstrong? Old Miss Winters only had primers and a Bible." "I've brought quite a few with me," Vivian assured him. "Classics, history, natural philosophy, poetry, and I've ordered more that should arrive by freight wagon next month." Robert's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "I've been reading about electricity and Mr. Edison's inventions. Do you have any books on those subjects?" "As a matter of fact, I do," Vivian said, pleased by his interest. "And the latest scientific American periodicals as well." As Robert peppered her with questions about the school curriculum, Vivian noticed Adam watching them from across the room, a thoughtful expression on his face. When their eyes met, he gave her a slight nod, as if approving of her interaction with his nephew. Dinner was indeed informal, as Martha had warned, but delightfully so. The table was laden with a magnificent beef roast, potatoes, fresh vegetables from Sarah's garden, and hot biscuits with honey. The conversation flowed easily, with Tom Miller proving to be a well-informed and articulate host who drew Vivian out on subjects ranging from Eastern politics to literature. "Adam tells us you offered him borrowing privileges at the school library," Sarah said as she passed a bowl of glazed carrots. "That was kind of you. Knowledge shouldn't be restricted to those still in school," Vivian replied. "And Mr. Daniels mentioned that your father was a teacher. It seems education runs in your family." Adam, who had been relatively quiet throughout the meal, looked up from his plate. "Pa believed in books the way some men believe in religion, said a man who stops learning might as well stop breathing." "A sentiment I share," Vivian said, meeting his gaze. "Uncle Adam knows more than he lets on," piped up Emma. "He taught me all about the stars and constellations last summer when I stayed at the ranch." Adam looked slightly embarrassed by his niece's praise. "Just passing on what Pa taught us, nothing formal like what Miss Armstrong will teach you." After dinner, while Sarah and Tom cleared the dishes, refusing Vivian's offers of help, Adam suggested a walk to show her the town from the hillside behind the house. "If you're not too tired from all the socializing," he added. "I'd enjoy that," Vivian said, ignoring the knowing look Sarah exchanged with her husband. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent as they strolled up the gentle slope behind the Millers' home. Adam had shed his suit jacket and rolled up his shirt sleeves, looking more comfortable than he had in church. They walked in companionable silence until they reached a flat outcropping of rock that offered a panoramic view of Jerome Junction spread out below them. "It's beautiful," Vivian said softly, taking in the sight of the frontier town nestled against the backdrop of rugged mountains. "So different from Boston. Do you miss it? The city, I mean." She considered the question carefully. "I miss certain aspects, the libraries, the theaters, the bustle of activity, but I don't miss the constraints." She glanced at him. "Women have very prescribed roles in Boston society, especially women of my background." Adam leaned against a large boulder, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. "And what background is that, if you don't mind my asking? You don't strike me as a typical schoolteacher." Vivian hesitated, then decided on honesty. "My father was a shipping merchant, quite successful. He had expectations that I would make an advantageous marriage, continue the family's social ascendancy." She looked down at her hands. "When I turned 24 without accepting any proposals, he selected a husband for me, a business associate 30 years my senior with 3 grown children." Adam's expression darkened. "And you ran." "I chose a different path," she corrected gently. "I had been teaching at a charity school for girls for several years against my father's wishes. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Arizona Territory, it seemed like Providence." "Took courage," Adam said, respect evident in his tone. "Coming all this way alone." "Or desperation," she admitted with a wry smile. "But I don't regret it. Already I feel more myself here than I ever did in Boston." He nodded, as if her words confirmed something he had suspected. "The West has a way of stripping away pretenses. Out here, what matters is what you can do, not who your family is or how you speak." "Is that why you stayed after the war? Because you could be yourself?" A shadow crossed his face. "Partly. And partly because there wasn't much left for me back home. War changes things, changes people." Vivian sensed the pain beneath his words and changed the subject. "Your niece and nephews are wonderful children. You must be proud of them." The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. "They're good kids. Sarah and Tom have done well with them." He glanced at her. "Robert's the brightest of the bunch. Boy has a mind like a steel trap, wants to be an engineer someday." "With proper education he could be," Vivian said. "He has the curiosity and intelligence for it." That's why folks were so eager for a real teacher to come. These children deserve more than just basic reading and ciphering. They deserve a chance at something better. The passion in his voice surprised her. This was a side of Adam Daniels she hadn't glimpsed before, a man who cared deeply about the future of the next generation, despite his own rough exterior. "I'll do my best for them," she promised. "Every one of them." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as the setting sun cast long shadows across the town below. Adam shifted slightly, and Vivian became acutely aware of how close they were standing, their shoulders nearly touching. "We should head back," he said finally, his voice lower than before. "Sarah will be wondering where we've gotten to, and I'm sure you've had enough of Miller family hospitality for one day." "On the contrary," Vivian replied, turning to face him fully. "This has been the most enjoyable day I've spent since arriving in Jerome Junction." Something flickered in Adam's eyes, a warmth that made her breath catch slightly. For a moment, she thought he might say more, might even reach for her hand. Instead, he straightened and gestured toward the path leading back to the house. "After you, Miss Armstrong." As they walked back down the hillside, Vivian found herself wondering what might have happened if they had remained on that outcropping a few moments longer, with the sun setting behind them and the town far below. The thought sent an unexpected thrill through her, followed quickly by a sense of caution. She had come west to escape one unwanted entanglement. It would be foolish to rush headlong into another, no matter how intriguing she found Adam Daniels. Yet as they rejoined the Miller family for evening tea before Adam escorted her back to the hotel, Vivian couldn't deny the connection she felt with the quiet rancher. There was a depth to him that belied his rough exterior, an intelligence and sensitivity that called to something within her. As they walked through the gathering twilight toward the hotel, Adam finally broke the comfortable silence between them. "School starts tomorrow, doesn't it?" "Yes," Vivian confirmed. "I'm both excited and nervous. 27 children of all different ages and abilities, it's a daunting challenge." "You'll manage it," he said with quiet confidence. "I've seen how Robert and Emmer respond to you already. You have a way about you." The simple compliment warmed her more than an elaborate one might have. "Thank you. That means a great deal coming from someone who knows the children well." They reached the hotel's front steps too quickly for Vivian's liking. Adam paused at the bottom, hat in hand. "Thank you for joining us today," he said formally. "Sarah and Tom enjoyed your company." "And I theirs," Vivian replied. "And yours, Mr. Daniels." He looked up at her, his expression unreadable in the deepening dusk. "Adam," he corrected gently, "at least when we're not in company." "Adam," she repeated, liking the way his name felt on her lips. "Then you must call me Vivian." A slight smile curved his mouth. "Vivian," he said, as if testing the sound of it. "Good luck tomorrow with the children. I'm sure you'll do fine. Will I see you again soon?" The question escaped before she could consider its propriety. "I'll be back in town next weekend," he replied. "Ranch keeps me busy during the week." He hesitated, then added, "But I might find an excuse to ride in before then." With that, he placed his hat back on his head, touched the brim in a gesture of farewell, and turned to walk away. Vivian watched him go, aware of a curious mixture of anticipation and caution swirling within her heart. The first day of school dawned bright and clear, with a sense of excitement permeating the small town. Vivian arrived at the schoolhouse early to make final preparations, arranging the slates and chalk, setting out readers for different levels, and writing a welcome message on the large blackboard that spanned the front wall. By 8 o'clock, children began arriving, some accompanied by parents eager to meet the new teacher, others in groups of siblings or neighbors. They entered with varying degrees of enthusiasm and trepidation, finding seats on the simple wooden benches. Vivian greeted each child by name, having memorized the roster Bernard Williams had provided. Robert Miller arrived with his siblings, giving her a shy nod of recognition. Other familiar faces from Sunday services appeared: the doctor's twin daughters, the blacksmith's son with his arm in a splint, the banker's pampered children in their fine clothes. At precisely 8:30, Vivian rang the school bell to officially begin the term. 27 children of various ages sat before her, their faces expectant, curious, and in some cases skeptical. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and confident despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I'm Miss Armstrong, and I'm very pleased to be your teacher." The school day unfolded better than she had dared hope. After initial assessments of each child's abilities, Vivian divided them into groups based on their reading and arithmetic skills, rather than strictly by age. She set the older, more advanced students to helping the younger ones with basic lessons while she worked with those in the middle. By the time the lunch hour arrived, Vivian had already identified her greatest challenges: Joshua Miller and two other 6-year-olds who had never been in a classroom before. A sullen 14-year-old boy named Peter whose father ran the saloon, and a bright but painfully shy girl named Clara who clearly knew more than she was willing to demonstrate. The afternoon session focused on history and natural science, with Vivian reading aloud from a book about the formation of mountains and valleys that had the children's rapt attention. Even Peter, who had spent most of the morning staring out the window, seemed interested in the descriptions of how copper and gold had formed in the hills around them. When the final bell rang at 4 o'clock, Vivian was exhausted but exhilarated. As the children gathered their things and filed out, many called goodbyes or thanked her for the day's lessons. Robert Miller lingered behind, a book clutched in his hands. "Miss Armstrong," he said hesitantly, "Uncle Adam mentioned you had books about electricity. May I borrow one?" "I promised to take good care of it." Vivian smiled, going to the shelf where she kept her personal collection. "I think you'll find this one interesting," she said, selecting a volume about recent scientific discoveries. Mr. Edison is mentioned quite extensively in the later chapters. Robert's face lit up as he accepted the book. "Thank you. Uncle Adam will want to read it too, I bet. He's always interested in new inventions." "He's welcome to read it as well," Vivian said, curious about this additional glimpse into Adam's character. "Is he an inventor himself?" Robert shook his head. "Not exactly, but he's built all kinds of useful things at the ranch. Made a water pump system that brings water right into the cookhouse from the stream. And he fixed up an old printing press for Mr. Henderson at the newspaper office when nobody else could figure it out." This new information added another layer to Vivian's growing impression of Adam Daniels, not just a cowboy or ranch foreman, but a man of practical intelligence and ingenuity. After Robert left, Vivian sat at her desk, recording notes about each student's progress and planning the next day's lessons. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear the footsteps on the schoolhouse steps until a knock sounded at the open door. Looking up, she was startled to find Adam Daniels standing in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. "Adam," she said, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. "This is unexpected." He stepped inside, removing his hat. "Finished my work at the ranch earlier than expected. Thought I'd ride in to see how your first day went." He glanced around the classroom. "Looks like you survived." "More than survived," Vivian said, gesturing for him to take a seat at one of the student desks. "It was wonderful." Challenging, certainly, but the children are bright and eager to learn, even those who tried to appear otherwise. Adam folded his long frame onto a bench clearly designed for someone much smaller. "Sarah says Robert wouldn't stop talking about your lessons all through lunch. Said you're teaching things old Miss Winters never mentioned. Robert is an exceptional student. He just borrowed a book on electrical science that I think he'll enjoy." She studied Adam curiously. "He mentioned you have an interest in inventions and mechanical things." A hint of color touched Adam's cheekbones. "Just practical applications, nothing scholarly." "Practical knowledge is often the most valuable kind," Vivian said. "I'd like to hear about this water pump system you designed for the ranch sometime." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Would you?" "Most ladies aren't interested in such things." "I'm not most ladies," Vivian replied with a small smile. "Besides, I need to understand all sorts of practical matters if I'm to teach effectively. Many of my students will become ranchers, miners, or tradespeople. Their education should prepare them for those futures." Adam leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. "That's a refreshing perspective. The last teacher mostly focused on recitation and penmanship." "Those have their place," Vivian acknowledged, "but education should be broader. More connected to real life." She closed her lesson book. "But enough about my educational philosophy. What really brings you to town on a Monday afternoon? Surely not just to check on my first day of teaching." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Caught me." "I brought in some supplies for the ranch that Sarah ordered, but," he hesitated. "I did want to see how you were settling in, and to give you this." From inside his vest, he withdrew a small leather-bound book and placed it on her desk. Vivian picked it up curiously, opening the cover to find a collection of Thoreau's essays. "It was my father's," Adam explained. "Found it when I was going through some old things at the ranch yesterday. Thought you might enjoy it, being from Massachusetts." Vivian ran her fingers over the well-worn pages, touched by the gesture. "This is very kind of you, but I couldn't accept something so personal. It was your father's, I've read it a dozen times," Adam interrupted gently. "And it's been sitting in a trunk gathering dust." "Books are meant to be read, aren't they? Besides, it's just a loan, like the one you gave Robert." His blue eyes held hers, and Vivian felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "In that case, I accept, thank you." For a moment, neither spoke, the connection between them almost tangible in the quiet schoolroom. Then the church bell rang in the distance, breaking the spell. Adam stood, reaching for his hat. "I should get back to the ranch before dark." Vivian rose as well, still holding the book. "Of course." "Thank you for stopping by, and for the book." At the doorway, he paused, turning back to face her. "There's a town social on Saturday evening. Dance at the community hall to raise money for a new church bell, would you? That is, might you be attending?" Vivian's heart quickened at the hesitant question. "I believe Bernard mentioned it. Yes, I plan to attend." "Good," Adam said simply. "That's good, I'll see you there then." As she watched him swing easily into the saddle and ride away, Vivian found herself smiling. Clutching Thoreau's essays to her chest, she returned to her desk, though her thoughts were far from lesson plans now. The week passed in a blur of teaching, planning, and gradually getting to know each of her students. By Friday afternoon, Vivian had established a routine that seemed to work well for the diverse group of children. The older students were responding to the responsibilities she gave them, helping with the younger ones and taking pride in their own advanced studies. Even Peter, the saloon keeper's son, had begun participating in class discussions, revealing a quick mind beneath his sullen exterior. As the children filed out at the end of the day, Martha Williams appeared at the schoolhouse door. "Vivian, dear," she called, waving a gloved hand. "I hoped to catch you before you left for the hotel, Mrs. Williams." Vivian greeted her with a smile, gathering her books and notes. "What brings you by?" Martha entered, her gaze sweeping over the classroom with approval. "Bernard tells me you've made remarkable progress with the children already. Mrs. Peterson says little Alice has never been so excited about school." "The children are wonderful," Vivian said sincerely, "so eager to learn." "Well, I'm pleased to hear it." Martha settled onto one of the benches, smoothing her skirts. "I actually came to discuss tomorrow's social. Bernard and I would be honored if you would accompany us. As a newcomer, it would be proper for you to arrive with established members of the community." Vivian hesitated, remembering Adam's question about whether she would attend. Had he intended to escort her himself? But no, he had merely asked if she would be there. "That's very kind of you," she said finally. "I would be happy to accompany you and Mr. Williams." "Excellent," Martha beamed. "And I've brought another of Elizabeth's dresses that would be perfect for dancing." She produced a package from her large handbag. Blue silk, very becoming, and just the thing for a social event. Vivian accepted the package with mixed feelings. Martha's generosity was genuine, but she couldn't shake the sense that the older woman was subtly attempting to guide her behavior and associations. "You're very thoughtful, Mrs. Williams. I'm not sure what I've done to deserve such kindness." Martha patted her hand. "Nonsense, dear. We're delighted to have you in Jerome Junction. A proper, educated young woman is an asset to our growing community." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Several of our most eligible bachelors have already expressed interest in making your acquaintance tomorrow evening. Mr. Henderson from the newspaper office is particularly eager to secure a dance." Vivian forced a smile, though the prospect of being paraded before the town's eligible men held little appeal. "How nice." "Of course, you must dance with everyone who asks," Martha continued blithely. "It wouldn't do to show preference so soon after your arrival. A schoolteacher must maintain a certain impartiality in social matters as well as professional ones." The implication was clear enough. Martha had noticed Adam's interest and was attempting to discourage any reciprocation on Vivian's part. "I'll keep that in mind," Vivian said neutrally. The town social was held in the community hall, a large wooden structure that served as meeting place, courthouse, and dance hall depending on the occasion. By the time Vivian arrived with the Williamses, the building was already crowded with townsfolk in their finest clothes. A small band consisting of a fiddle, guitar, and piano played lively tunes at one end of the hall, while tables laden with food and drink lined the opposite wall. Vivian wore the blue silk dress Martha had provided, though she had styled her hair more simply than the elaborate arrangement Martha had suggested. The gown was beautiful, fitting her well with only minor alterations, and she knew it showed her figure to advantage. Bernard Williams immediately began introducing her to people she hadn't yet met, including several unmarried men who looked at her with undisguised interest. The newspaper editor, Mr. Henderson, was particularly attentive, claiming the first dance before the introductions were even complete. "We're so pleased to have a cultured young lady join our community," he said as they joined the set forming for a Virginia reel. "I hope you'll consider contributing to the Junction Journal occasionally. Your Eastern perspective would be valuable to our readers." "That's very flattering, Mr. Henderson, but I'm not a writer," Vivian demurred. "My focus is on the school and my students." Of course, he nodded, "but perhaps an article on modern educational methods. Our readers are very interested in progress." The dance began before Vivian could respond, saving her from having to commit to anything. As she moved through the patterns of the reel, she found herself scanning the room for Adam. He had said he would attend, but there was no sign of him among the dancers or the groups standing along the walls. After the reel ended, Vivian barely had time to catch her breath before another gentleman claimed her hand for a waltz. For the next hour, she was passed from partner to partner, dancing continuously as Martha had instructed. The attention was flattering but exhausting, and when a quadrille ended, she excused herself to get a cup of punch. It was at the refreshment table that she finally spotted Adam. He stood near the doorway, deep in conversation with his brother-in-law Tom Miller. Unlike their last meeting at church, Adam was not wearing his Sunday best, but rather clean work clothes, dark trousers, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to expose his forearms, and a black vest. His hair was damp, as if he had recently washed it, and even from across the room, Vivian could see he had shaved. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, their eyes meeting across the crowded hall. A flicker of something appreciation perhaps crossed his face as he took in her appearance in the blue silk dress. He nodded in acknowledgement, a slight smile touching his lips. Vivian felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with the exertion of dancing. She started to move toward him when Martha Williams appeared at her elbow. "Vivian, dear, the deputy marshal is most anxious for this next dance. Such a respectable young man, his father was a judge in St. Louis, you know. Actually, Mrs. Williams, I was hoping for a moment's rest," Vivian began, but Martha was already guiding her toward a tall young man in a smartly tailored suit. "Deputy Caldwell, may I present Miss Armstrong, our new schoolteacher," Martha said, practically beaming. "Vivian, this is Deputy James Caldwell." The deputy bowed slightly, his manner formal but pleasant. "Miss Armstrong, it's a pleasure. I've heard nothing but praise for your teaching this week." "Thank you, Deputy," Vivian replied politely. "The children make it a joy. I hope you'll do me the honor of this dance." He asked, offering his arm as the band struck up a waltz. With Martha watching expectantly, Vivian could hardly refuse. As they joined the other couples on the floor, she caught a glimpse of Adam still by the doorway, now watching her with an unreadable expression. Deputy Caldwell proved to be an excellent dancer, guiding her smoothly through the waltz while maintaining a respectful conversation about the town and her impressions of it. Under other circumstances, Vivian might have found him charming. As it was, she found her attention repeatedly drawn to the figure by the door, who had not joined the dancing but seemed to be observing the room with quiet intensity. When the waltz ended, Vivian thanked the deputy and was about to excuse herself when she felt a presence at her side. Turning, she found Adam standing there, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss Armstrong," he said formally, aware of the curious glances from nearby dancers. "Might I have the next dance?" She felt a surge of pleasure at his request. Of course, Mr. Daniels. The band began a slower waltz, and Adam offered his hand. As his palm met hers, Vivian felt that same jolt of awareness she had experienced when he helped her from the overturned stagecoach. His other hand came to rest lightly at her waist as they began to move with the music. "I was beginning to think you weren't going to ask me to dance," she said quietly. "Wasn't sure it would be welcome," he replied, his blue eyes intent on hers. "You've had no shortage of partners tonight." "None that I particularly wish to dance with," Vivian admitted. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Is that so?" His hand tightened slightly at her waist as he guided her through a turn. "You look beautiful tonight, Vivian. That blue suits you." The compliment, delivered in his deep voice just above a whisper, sent a warm flush through her. "Thank you. Though I confess I feel a bit like a doll being dressed up and passed around. Mrs. Williams has been very helpful with my social introduction to Jerome Junction." Understanding flashed in Adam's eyes. "Martha means well. She's just set on making sure you meet the right people." "And you're not among them," Vivian challenged quietly. "Not in her estimation, no." His expression remained neutral, but she felt the tension in his frame. Ranch foremen don't typically court schoolteachers in polite society. The word court hung between them, neither acknowledging nor dismissing it. "I left Boston partly to escape polite society and its arbitrary rules," Vivian said after a moment. "I had hoped things would be different here." "They are, in some ways," Adam replied, his voice low. "But people are still people. Wherever you go, they have expectations, prejudices." The waltz was drawing to a close, and Vivian realized with disappointment that their brief time together was ending. As the final notes faded, Adam released her waist but held onto her hand a moment longer than necessary. "Would you walk outside with me?" he asked suddenly. "Just for a minute to get some air." Aware of Martha Williams watching from across the room, Vivian hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Yes, I'd like that." Adam guided her toward the side door, which opened onto a small porch overlooking the town square. The night was cool but pleasant, with a blanket of stars spread across the dark sky and a half-moon casting silver light over the buildings of Jerome Junction. They were alone, the sounds of the dance muted behind the closed door. "I've been wanting to talk to you all evening," Adam said, leaning against the porch railing. "But you were surrounded by admirers." "Not by choice," Vivian assured him, moving to stand beside him. "Mrs. Williams seems determined to introduce me to every unmarried man in the territory." "Can't blame them for being interested," he said, his gaze traveling over her face in the moonlight. "You're not like any woman they've met before." The simple statement, delivered without flattery or pretense, touched Vivian deeply. "What makes you say that?" Adam considered for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You look at things directly." "Most ladies I've known, at least the educated, refined ones, they talk around subjects, hide behind manners and propriety. You say what you think, but kindly." "Is that unusual here? Western women are generally more forthright than Eastern ones," he acknowledged. "But they're also mostly practical, focused on survival and family. You combine that directness with a way of seeing beyond the surface of things." He glanced at her. "It's compelling." Vivian felt her heart quicken at the intensity in his gaze. "You're rather compelling yourself, Adam Daniels. A cowboy who reads Thoreau and builds water pumps isn't exactly what I expected to find in Arizona territory." A soft chuckle escaped him. "I'm full of surprises. I'd like to discover them," she said boldly, then blushed at her own forwardness. Adam's expression grew more serious. "Vivian, I need to be honest with you. I'm not the kind of man someone like you typically associates with. I work with my hands, live mostly at a ranch bunkhouse, have nothing to offer except intelligence, kindness, and more depth than most men I've ever known," she interrupted. "I didn't come west looking for wealth or position, Adam. I came looking for a place where I could be valued for my mind and character, not my family connections or marriageability." "Even so," he persisted, "you should know that people will talk if we." He seemed unable to find the right words. "If we become friends," Vivian supplied, deliberately keeping her tone light. "Or something more than friends." Adam's gaze was steady on hers. "Both. Martha Williams isn't the only one who has opinions about appropriate matches." The The school board might not take kindly to their teacher forming an attachment to a ranch hand. "I won't let others dictate my relationships," Vivian said firmly. "Not again." "It's not that simple," Adam sighed. "Your position here matters, the school matters. I wouldn't want to jeopardize that for you." Before Vivian could respond, the door opened behind them, spilling light and music onto the porch. Martha Williams stood in the doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and disapproval. "Vivian, dear, you're missing the Virginia reel. Mr. Henderson has been looking everywhere for you." Her gaze flicked to Adam, then back to Vivian. "It's quite stuffy in there, isn't it? But perhaps you've had enough fresh air for now." The interruption was deliberate, Vivian knew, and based on Martha's expression, she had heard at least part of their conversation. Reluctantly, she turned away from Adam. "Yes, Mrs. Williams, I was just coming back inside." As she moved toward the door, Vivian glanced back at Adam, who remained by the railing. His expression was carefully neutral, but she saw the conflict in his eyes. "Will you be returning to the dance?" she asked him. He shook his head slightly. "I should be getting back to the ranch." "Early start tomorrow." "I understand," Vivian said, though disappointment washed through her. "Thank you for the dance, Mr. Daniels." "Good night, Miss Armstrong," he replied formally, aware of Martha's watchful presence. As she followed Martha back inside, Vivian couldn't help looking back once more. Adam stood silhouetted against the night sky, his tall figure outlined by moonlight, watching her go. The image stayed with her through the remainder of the evening, through dances with men whose names she barely registered and conversations that washed over her without leaving any impression. Something had shifted between them on that moonlit porch, a recognition of mutual interest that went beyond casual friendship. But Adam's concerns lingered in her mind. Was he right that pursuing any kind of relationship with him might jeopardize her position in the community? And if so, was she willing to take that risk? As the weeks passed, Vivian fell into a rhythm with her teaching duties. The children continued to progress, showing improvement not just in their studies but in their behavior and enthusiasm as well. Even Peter, the saloon keeper's son, had become one of her most engaged students after she discovered his talent for mathematics and put him in charge of helping younger children with their arithmetic. The living quarters behind the schoolhouse were finally ready, and Vivian moved from the hotel into the small but comfortable cabin. It was a simple dwelling, just 2 rooms, with a combined kitchen and sitting area in one and a bedroom in the other, but it offered privacy and independence that she had never experienced before. She decorated it with small touches that made it feel like home. Wildflowers in a jar on the table, a colorful quilt from Sarah Miller on the bed, and most importantly, her books arranged on shelves that Tom Miller had built for her. Adam had kept his distance since the town social, appearing only at Sunday services with his sister's family and nodding politely to Vivian from across the churchyard. She understood his caution, especially after Bernard Williams had taken her aside one day after school to gently suggest that a schoolteacher should be careful about forming attachments that might be misinterpreted by the community. The implication had been clear, and though Vivian had responded with a neutral comment about focusing on her teaching duties, she had felt a flash of resentment at the thinly veiled warning. It seemed that even here, hundreds of miles from Boston, social expectations would try to dictate her personal choices. October brought cooler temperatures and a flurry of activity as the town prepared for harvest celebrations. The children were rehearsing a pageant to be performed at the Harvest Festival, and Vivian spent extra hours after school helping them memorize their parts and creating simple costumes. It was during one such afternoon session, as she was pinning paper leaves onto a burlap tunic for a child playing the role of Autumn, that a shadow fell across the schoolhouse doorway. Looking up, Vivian felt her heart skip as Adam Daniels filled the frame, hat in hand. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his gaze taking in the scene children scattered around the room in various states of costume preparation, paper decorations strewn across desks, and Vivian kneeling on the floor with pins in her mouth. She quickly removed the pins, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks. "Adam, Mr. Daniels, this is a surprise." The children looked up with interest at the visitor. Robert Miller waved from where he was helping a younger student with a headdress of paper feathers. "Uncle Adam, are you staying for the rehearsal?" Adam shook his head. "Just passing through, Robert." "Got some business with your pa at the store." He glanced at Vivian. "Could I speak with you a moment, Miss Armstrong? Outside, perhaps?" Vivian's pulse quickened. "Of course. Children, continue working on your costumes. Robert, you're in charge until I return." Outside on the schoolhouse steps, the October sunshine cast long shadows across the yard. Adam stood with his hat in his hands, turning the brim slowly between his fingers, a gesture Vivian had come to recognize as a sign of thoughtfulness or uncertainty. "You've been avoiding me," she said directly once they were alone. He looked up, surprise flickering in his blue eyes. "Not avoiding, just being careful. Because of what people might think, because of what they might say," he corrected. "About you, not me." "I don't care what they think of me, but your position here is important." Vivian sighed, some of her annoyance fading. "I appreciate your concern, Adam, but I'm capable of managing my own reputation. I've missed our conversations." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I've missed them too." He hesitated, then continued. "That's partly why I'm here. I finished the Thoreau you lent me and wanted to return it, and to ask if you'd consider riding out to the Triple R on Saturday. The aspen trees are turning in the high country, and it's a sight worth seeing." Vivian's heart leapt at the invitation, but caution tempered her reaction. "As much as I'd like to, wouldn't that be exactly the sort of thing you're concerned about? Me visiting you at the ranch? It wouldn't be just us," Adam explained. "Sarah and the children are coming out for the day. Tom's minding the store, but he thought the family could use an outing before winter sets in. Sarah suggested I invite you along." The thought of spending a day away from town, seeing the ranch where Adam worked and the autumn colors in the mountains, was tremendously appealing. And with Sarah and the children present, even the most gossipy townspeople could hardly object. "I'd love to come," Vivian said, making up her mind. "What time should I be ready?" "I'll come by with the wagon around 9, Adam replied, visible relief in his expression. "Wear something warm. It gets cooler up in the hills, even when the sun's out." From inside the schoolhouse came the sound of children's laughter, followed by a crash and a chorus of "uh-oh" that suggested the rehearsal was getting out of hand without supervision. "I should get back," Vivian said reluctantly. Adam nodded, placing his hat back on his head. "Saturday, then, 9 o'clock. As he walked away toward the general store, Vivian watched him for a moment, a smile playing at her lips. The prospect of Saturday's outing had lifted her spirits in a way she hadn't expected. It wasn't until she turned to go back inside that she noticed Martha Williams standing across the street, watching with a thoughtful expression. Saturday dawned clear and crisp, the kind of autumn day that seemed to sharpen every color and sound. Vivian rose early, both excited and slightly nervous about the day ahead. She dressed carefully in her most practical skirt of sturdy brown wool, a cream-colored shirtwaist, and a knitted shawl that Sarah Miller had given her as a welcome gift. Her hair she braided simply and coiled at the nape of her neck, knowing the day's activities wouldn't accommodate an elaborate style. At precisely 9 o'clock, she heard the sound of wagon wheels outside her small cabin. Gathering her shawl and a small basket containing bread, and preserves her contribution to the day's picnic lunch, she stepped outside to find Adam waiting with a wagon hitched to 2 sturdy bay horses. Sarah was already seated in the back with her children, all bundled in warm clothes against the morning chill. "Good morning," Sarah called cheerfully. "What perfect weather for our outing." Adam jumped down from the driver's seat, coming around to help Vivian up. As he took her hand, their eyes met briefly, and Vivian felt that now familiar flutter in her chest at his proximity. "You look lovely," he said quietly for her ears alone. "Practical but lovely." "Thank you," she replied, equally soft. "I'm looking forward to seeing the ranch." The journey to the Triple R took about an hour, following a winding road that climbed gradually into the foothills north of Jerome Junction. As they traveled, the landscape changed from the desert scrub around town to scattered junipers and pines, and finally to groves of aspen trees whose leaves had turned brilliant gold against the blue October sky. Sarah kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the area's history. The children chimed in with their own observations, especially when they spotted wildlife, a family of deer browsing in a meadow, a red-tailed hawk circling overhead. Adam was quieter, focused on driving the team, but occasionally he would glance back at Vivian with a small smile that seemed to say he was glad she had come. Each time their eyes met, she felt a deepening connection that went beyond words. The Triple R Ranch spread across a broad valley surrounded by forested hills. The main house was a substantial log structure with a wide porch, smoke curling invitingly from its stone chimney. Nearby stood a bunkhouse, barn, corrals, and various outbuildings that formed the working heart of the cattle operation. As Adam brought the wagon to a stop in front of the main house, a weathered man with a silver-streaked beard emerged from the barn, followed by several cowboys. "That's Mr. Reynolds," Sarah explained to Vivian. "He owns the Triple R. The older cowboy beside him is Hank, the cook. The others are some of the hands that work with Adam." Mr. Reynolds approached as Adam helped the women and children down from the wagon. "Daniels, didn't expect you in today. Thought you were taking the day off." "Just showing my sister's family and Miss Armstrong the autumn colors, sir," Adam replied. "Thought we'd stop by the ranch for lunch before heading up to the high meadow." The ranch owner's gaze settled on Vivian with open curiosity. "Miss Armstrong, the schoolteacher, heard good things about you from folks in town." "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds," Vivian said, offering her hand. "Your ranch is beautiful." "Built it from nothing 20 years ago," he said with pride, his weathered hand engulfing hers in a firm handshake. "Started with 10 head of cattle and a dream. Now we run over 2,000 head on 30,000 acres. He glanced at Adam. "Couldn't have expanded the last few years without this young man. Best foreman I've ever had." Adam looked slightly embarrassed by the praise. "Just doing my job, sir. And doing it well enough that I'm considering retirement," Reynolds continued. "Been thinking it's time to hand over more responsibility, maybe even a partnership for the right man." The statement clearly surprised Adam, who looked at his employer with undisguised astonishment. "Sir," Reynolds chuckled, "we'll talk about it later. For now, show your guests around." Hank's been baking all morning once he heard Sarah and the children were visiting. As the ranch owner walked away, Sarah looked at her brother with wide eyes. "Adam, did he just say what I think he said? A partnership?" "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Adam cautioned, though Vivian could see the pleased look in his eyes. "He mentioned something about changing the management structure a few weeks ago, but nothing specific." "Still," Sarah persisted, "that's remarkable recognition of your work here." Adam shrugged, clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention. "Let me show you around before lunch," he suggested, changing the subject. "The children might like to see the new foals in the corral." The morning passed pleasantly as Adam guided them around the ranch, showing them the operations and introducing them to the men he worked with. Vivian was struck by the respect the cowboys showed him, deferring to his judgment and obviously holding him in high regard. This was a different side of Adam than she had seen before the capable leader, knowledgeable about every aspect of the ranch's operation, confident in his domain. After a hearty lunch prepared by Hank and shared with several of the ranch hands in the cookhouse, Adam suggested they continue their outing to the high meadow where the aspen trees were at their most spectacular. They left the wagon at the ranch and rode on horseback instead, with the children sharing mounts with Adam and Sarah, while Vivian rode a gentle mare that Adam assured her was perfect for inexperienced riders. "I should warn you that I've never ridden before," Vivian admitted as he helped her into the saddle. "We didn't keep horses in Boston." "You'll do fine," he said, his hands lingering at her waist. "Daisy here is as steady as they come. Just relax and move with her." The trail to the high meadow wound through increasingly beautiful country, with aspen groves glowing like gold coins against the dark green of pines. The air was crisp and scented with fallen leaves and pine needles, the only sounds the gentle rhythm of hoofbeats, and the occasional call of a jay or raven. Adam rode beside Vivian, occasionally reaching over to adjust her grip on the reins or offering quiet encouragement. By the time they reached the meadow, She had gained enough confidence to enjoy the experience rather than focusing all her attention on staying mounted. The meadow itself took Vivian's breath away. It spread before them like a golden sea, ringed by aspen trees whose yellow leaves trembled in the slight breeze. Beyond rose the mountains, their peaks already dusted with the first snow of the season. "It's magnificent," she breathed, reining in beside Adam at the meadow's edge. "I've never seen anything like it." "Worth the ride?" he asked, his eyes warm as they met hers. "Worth everything," she replied softly. "Thank you for bringing me here." Sarah and the children had ridden ahead into the meadow, the younger ones exclaiming over late-blooming wildflowers and interesting rocks. Adam and Vivian followed more slowly, letting their horses pick their way through the tall grass. "Mr. Reynolds seems to think highly of you," Vivian commented. "A partnership would be quite an opportunity." Adam nodded thoughtfully. "It would change things. I've been saving to buy my own small spread someday, but a partnership in an established ranch like the Triple R." He glanced at her. "It would mean a real future here, something to build on." The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. A partnership would elevate Adam's position in the community, make him a man of property and standing rather than just a ranch foreman. "Whatever happens," Vivian said carefully, "I think you've earned recognition for your hard work and abilities." "Thank you," he said simply. Then, after a moment, "Vivian, I've been thinking about what you said at the schoolhouse about me avoiding you." "And," she prompted when he fell silent. "You were right." He guided his horse closer to hers, their legs nearly touching. "I've been cautious because I didn't want to cause problems for you in town, but maybe I was also protecting myself." "From what?" His blue eyes held hers steadily. "From caring too much for someone who might decide the West isn't for her after all. Someone who might realize that life here is too rough, too limited compared to what she left behind." Vivian's heart quickened at his honesty. "Adam, I have no intention of returning east. Jerome Junction is my home now." She took a deep breath. "And the people here, certain people have come to mean a great deal to me." A slow smile spread across his face, warming his eyes. "Is that so, Miss Armstrong?" "It is, Mr. Daniels," she replied, matching his smile with her own.